Now, to me, and what I mentioned in my platform is that strikes me as a recognition that we may elect a mayor who is completely unqualified to the job, and therefore we need to have this very high salary to attract a professional city manager to really run the show. And if that's the case, why did we elect this office? Why didn't we just keep council manager? So I suggested reducing that and making it more of a role of a day-to-day operations manager, a good, effective chief of staff, and using some of those cost savings to do something more important, I think, for the City of New London, which is hire a full-time grants coordinator for the city, something we don't have right now, because a lot of these redevelopment efforts are going to require outside revenue. I mean, we're definitely...
At least in the short term.
At least in the short term.
Hopefully they'll pay back.
Yes, hopefully they'll pay back. Hopefully, if they grow local revenue and grow local tax base, it will increase local sources of revenue in the long term. But in the short term, to get it done, we're not going to be able to rely on the tax base. So we're going to need to look for more grants, and to have a full-time professional grants coordinator, I think, would be a good thing in city government.
Now, what do you see as the role of council under this new form of government? I've heard a few people saying that they don't know who will even want to run for council now that it's been so disempowered. Yeah,
I'm very concerned about that, because when I worked in New York City government, I worked as a legislative analyst to the New York City Council in a strong mayor form of government. And one of the things we fought for the 2 years that I worked for the City Council, was trying to assert that body's authority as a co-equal branch of government. Obviously, the charter vests all this power in the mayor. So one way or the other, the mayor has that authority. But that doesn't mean that a good mayor, a good administrator, won't keep an open door to the council at all times. If I was going to appoint a head of a particular department, why not consult with members of the council? Yes, you have the authority to do it without their approval. So what? Talk to them. If you're preparing the budget, don't just prepare the budget and send it over to them. Involve them from the get-go. You know, involve them in the process, because that way, if there are conflicts, they can be worked out without it coming to a veto-driven showdown, you know, which benefits no one. So I think a lot of it will depend on what kind of mayor we elect. Just because the mayor has all this power doesn't mean that the mayor needs to be closed off. The mayor should not be. The mayor should not be a bully. You know, just because you have the power doesn't mean you always have to use it. I would seek to work with the council in a collaborative way, benefit from their insight, their guidance, and their experience, and hopefully some of the experienced members will stay because they have some of that institutional memory. But also, a good mayor, and I talk about this, just because these strong mayors can stay in there for decades, you shouldn't. And I believe a good mayor should always be planning for a good succession. You know, cultivating new people to say, hey, come run for council, come serve in this appointed office, and start to learn the ropes, because eventually, at some point, there'll be a new mayor, and that new mayor should have some good experience before taking the job. So I would always be looking to cultivate new people, bring new people in, not only because it brings in new ideas and new energies, but because then we have a good crop of people from whom to choose the next mayor.
Do you expect that there might be some kind of backlash on how powerful the mayor has become, and have a public calling out for a new charter revision commission to moderate things a little?
I think a lot of it will depend on the first mayor. I mean, the only real parallel that I can think of in this scenario on the local level was in West Warwick, Rhode Island. West Warwick, Rhode Island in the 1990s switched from council manager to mayor. The mayor was Catherine O'Hare. She came in and, you know, mishandled the situation, and they wound up abolishing the whole form of government very quickly. So she became the first and last mayor.
I would hope we wouldn't be that extreme here.
I certainly hope that that would not happen here. But the other parallel would be something like even George Washington serving as the first president. You know, a lot of it, we didn't know how this new office was going to function, so it fell upon the first few people who occupied it to set, if not the charter precedent, a practitioner precedent of saying this is how a good mayor should operate. And along the way, I would certainly consider some reductions. I think the override should be 5, not 6. I wouldn't block that. I would fight to get that out to the voters. I would submit something to the state legislature saying, you know, we want a recall provision, we want a term limitation, and see where it goes. I'm not opposed to those kinds of reforms, but I think a lot of the public reaction will depend on the character and the, you know, quality of service of the first person that occupies the office.
I think we can talk about some issues now.
Great.
I also want to invite people who are watching to call in if you have some issues or other things that you'd like Daryl to speak to.
Certainly.
Okay.
Anything.
Well, we can start with the economy. That's
great.
New London's economy is really not great right now, and of course the state and national economies are also kind of vulnerable at this time. So what would be your plan for economic development, or in a long range, short range and long range way?
Well, certainly I think it is a tough economic time. We're all very well aware of that. But there are some positive signs out there. We've had, I believe we're on month 10 or 11 now of positive domestic growth. The unemployment rate finally fell in December from 9.8 to 9.4, so we're seeing job creation coming back up. The market, which had gone all the way down to 6,500, is now holding steady over 11,000. So the credit lending markets are opening, you know. So you're seeing the signs of some economic progress. And I think that New London can catch on with that, and I think we have some events coming like OpSale in 2012 and other things that will, you know, generate some new life in our local economy just because the national trends are changing. What I think specifically we should do in New London from a city standpoint is I think we need to emphasize an economic development strategy geared around small business growth. Because small businesses, a diversified small business economy, is more economically sustainable. If we continue as a community to rely on the defense industry with EB as our only economic engine, or if we continue to have these economic get-rich-quick schemes, as I think of them, like the Pfizer debacle, which did not work out well for the city of New London, we are never going to build
that could have really been predicted 10 years ago, that it wasn't going to
I think it was
work out well.
Ill thought out from start to finish. But, you know, when you invest in one industry or you invest in one large company, if anything changes in that industry, or if that company should ever make a management decision to leave, as Pfizer just did, we're left high and dry. If we have a diversified small business economy with many small firms, a couple good things happen. Number one is that when the recessions hit, and they always do, or when there's a downturn or an event or something bad, we can ride it out because the number of little small firms feed off of each other, employ more local people, which is the other thing that's more important about small businesses, is that small businesses in New London employ New Londoners.
Right, and not just directly in their business, but they're more likely to use a local bank. They're more likely to get their own materials from a local
business.
Yeah.
The businesses feed off of each other. And in an economic downturn, a small business owner, if I have 2 employees, and my family ran a small business, my campaign manager runs a small business, you know, if you come from that background, you know that if the economy is suffering, you'd rather cut your own salary or miss a payment on your own mortgage before you laid off a multi-year employee who was valuable to your small business. But a big company, the minute there's an economic constriction, the CEO doesn't cut his benefits package. Pink slips go out to all the middle-class people that work for that company. So, you know, these small businesses are a much more sustainable economic engine for the City of New London. They provide jobs for people in New London, which is the most important thing, which is why in my platform I don't call it economic development. I call it economic empowerment, because that's what we need to do. We need to empower people in the city if we want our economy to grow long term. So I think that's the way to do it. And one more thing about small businesses too, is that small businesses will also give somebody a break or a second chance. You know, you go into New London small businesses and you will find out that New London small businesses hired someone who used to be homeless. New London small businesses hire someone that got out of prison, you know, hires a young kid for their first job. You know, Pfizer doesn't do that. So I think we need to refocus our priorities there. And then obviously green technology growth, which I know we'll talk a lot more about.
Yeah.